So let's see. My name is Yrthya, and I always do that because it's typically hard for people to figure out how to pronounce my name. I now work at a foundation, the Open Society Foundation, which was founded by George Soros, the now philanthropist and very successful financier. And I just started working there in July, so I was onboarded in the middle of the pandemic, completely remotely. It's the first time I've ever started a job where I've not physically met any of the people with whom I work. And I lead culture and operations for the U.S. program, which is one of the 27 foundations that comprises the Open Society Foundation. And my job really is to help navigate the organization through an internal change in the midst of a global transformation of the world. So it's been, needless to say, a very interesting experience, challenging at times, and has afforded me actually the gift and the opportunity, because I'm choosing to see it that way, of really trying to face and reflect on what is important to me in my life in this moment. So that's just sort of a little bit of where I'm at. Before that, I've worked in corporate, I've worked in philanthropy, I've also worked in government. It's been a very kind of eclectic career, which I'm happy to sort of connect with people about as we have a conversation together.
Yeah, and we can make this conversation interactive too. We can, open it up for questions. But I'd love, of course, because I like to go deep and usually my Scorpio moon has me. I want to dive deep into what you're experiencing on a personal level. Like what, for me, I felt like I was immediately confronted with parts of myself, perhaps, that I hadn't gotten up close and personal with, and have been managed to be able to kind of navigate through that. I guess my first question is, what were the parts of you what parts of you are you learning about or first coming online with, and how has that journey been, and what's been your process? Does that?
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, I think I'll go back a little bit. So I was most recently at a company called Warner Media. It was formerly called Time Warner, and it was acquired by AT&T finally last year in June. And it was a 2-year process of AT&T trying to acquire this company. It was painful. It was very draining and required a lot of politicking internally. It was one of the most exhausting experiences that I've ever been through in my life. And at the end of the acquisition, I sort of had to really think about, do I want to stay in this place? Do I want to take this new opportunity with this new company? Or am I going to give myself the chance to take another risk in my life? Having a child at home, being the traditional breadwinner in my family, and having a lot of need for security. So this is the theme of my life, is trying to balance out risk versus security, right? Sure. I'm a very planful person. I'm a very practical person. And I've not taken a risk in my life lately, and it was going to be very difficult to do that under this circumstance of I have a child, I'm the traditional breadwinner. My husband is a filmmaker, which could be rainful one year and literally nothing the next year. Right? This is a very, interesting ride, right? Exactly. So Jan's also, right? And Tracy. So I sort of found myself at this crossroads, but I really disliked the environment that I was working in. Sure. And it was tarnishing my relationship with my daughter. It was straining my marriage. It was just a really difficult thing. And so I essentially kind of straddled those two things and got myself a very nice kind of landing cushion, that nice long severance package, which was beautiful, which is great. Hallelujah.
Praise the Lord.
Exactly. And And I thought, okay, I've managed to negotiate this. This is the time for me to like kind of look at what I want to do next. And I essentially, had enough time. I took about 6 months to just really think about what I wanted to do.
Yeah.
And decided that it was time for me to focus on giving back, right? Because I'd just been in this position of getting a lot, and it was time for me to give back. And that just happened to coincide sort of with, sort of this COVID moment. It happened to coincide with sort of this increasing moment around Black justice and this movement for rights and focusing more on people. And also this like question of, this broader question, I think, of COVID-19, which is how much do you actually care about your health?
Right.
Right? Right.
How much do you care about your health?
How much do you care about your health, right? Is this something that you have actually focused on actively?
Yeah.
Or is it something that you've been kind of like just doing the bare minimum around, right? And what does health more broadly mean, right?
Yes.
Sort of mental health, emotional health, and physical health. And so, I just was really at this crossroads. I was like more than 45, not quite 50, right? But just like in this moment of really reflecting, who am I? What's important to me? What is the next, sort of phase of my life really about? And what am I going to prioritize?
Yeah.
But a lot of that was like sort of all of these external forces just kind of, aiding that self-reflection.
Yeah. Which I think is very much what the process of COVID has been for many of us, right? It has brought us to a place where we've been forced to stop and look at what's priority. And I think the question that you asked about health is such an important one. I'm a believer that I'm fully responsible for my health, like nobody else. I take full responsibility for my health. I didn't always, and like you, I was in a corporate place where my health was deprioritized, as was probably the relationship with my children, if I were to be honest, right? And so it sounds like that moment for you came amongst a bigger moment, which was even probably more, confronting in some ways.
Yes.
And so where did you land in terms of what's important with you with the health?
So, I think I love
self-care.
talking in metaphors, and analogies. And so I think my symbol of how I refocus my energy and sort of where I landed on this is that, so 2019 was a year where I was basically in my house like 1 day a week on average, right? Maybe. And I spent probably 4 months meticulously picking out this couch. But not ever in my house, right? Like I was always on a plane, like what is this? Do I want an emerald green couch? Do I want a sapphire blue? Like which kind of cut? Like just like, this couch was like so important to me for my living room that I never got to sit in. Right. In 2019, and countless hours later, and like too much money later, finally this couch arrives, and it's just sitting in my living room, and I get to like see it on my way upstairs to like go to bed because I'm exhausted. Contrast to February of this year, my couch now has like a nice little dent from where my butt sits in it all of the time, right? So 2019 was about dreaming about all of the comforts that I wanted to surround myself with.
Yes.
And 2020 was about me actually sitting in and enjoying all of the comforts that I had surrounded myself with, right? And I think that is really the lesson that I have learned this year that I've been like trying to put myself through, right? And that is the balance of not just surrounding myself with the things that are important to me, but actually enjoying them and participating in them and like, making sure my butt is making a dent on my couch that I really love.
As you're speaking, I'm thinking of a couple of things. One of them is like the idea of creating our nests, right? And creating the spaces, our safe sanctuaries and nests. And many of us, like you, our homes were not that for us. For me, the same. I was out the door. My mom used to say, when I would go back to Dublin, your bum doesn't even hit the floor or hit the seat, because I was always running. And so this idea of creating these sanctuaries, these nests, coming home, like to our homes, but also coming home to ourselves. So this idea that you had this opportunity to come home to who you really are.
Yes.
And I also, I just wanted to point that out. And I also was thinking about this idea of harvest, right? So this idea that you've worked so hard, you've like really worked many years, and you've struggled probably, and really but you've created this life that now you have an opportunity to maybe harvest some of the fruits of those labor, which is a beautiful cycle to be in, and to acknowledge the accomplishments, because quite often we also don't acknowledge the accomplishments that we have, that we've created in our lives, because we're too busy to want to go to the next thing.
Yes.
So did you have an opportunity, when you looked back, when you sat on the couch, what was happening?
I mean, I think, we talked about this a little bit earlier, right? This sort of like this sense of guilt. I think there's also a lot of fear that sometimes keeps us from taking quote unquote risks. I remember I had another friend who is now working on the Biden campaign, interestingly enough, but she and I were kind of having this conversation as we were both kind of looking to shift our careers. And we were just kind of talking about this idea of risk, right? And so I had to like tell myself like almost daily, right? That like it was almost fictional risk, this thing that I was telling myself that I was engaging in, right? Because really, like, the worst case scenario is that I was giving a job making 7 figures to have a job making 6 figures. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's not real risk, right? Risk is like you don't have food on the table the next day, right?
Yes.
Risk is like you don't actually have a home to go to, right? So I also had to sort of like kind of reality check myself about like, what is risk, right? Versus what is like some sense of you needing to keep up with something that you felt was important.
Absolutely.
That maybe isn't important to your 45-year-old self. It was important to your 22-year-old self, right?
Totally.
But I think like as women especially, right? Like, and my husband is like a great reminder on a daily basis, right? He like quite literally makes stuff out of nothing. Like it does not exist. It never existed. This thing that he ends up making did not exist, right? The money for it wasn't there. Like none of it existed. And so, that's like not the case with me, right? Like typically I'm going into like a job and the salary's coming every 2 weeks and the bonus is coming once a year, right? Like it's so just to get, for women it's hard, right? To kind of get over that, the fear, right? Of not having something, and the fear of taking a risk because the proposition for us seems so different. But I had to do like a lot of thinking about like, this is not like bad, right?
Yeah.
It's just different, and what about it is good because it's the kind of different that you want. And what about it is something that you have to manage, and you have the skill set and the resources and the network and the support systems to manage that. But fear and guilt, and the guilt of like, I mean, just to be honest and real, right? Like the guilt of like, did I fail at this thing, right? Like, I'm like some big muckety-muck executive at this like huge firm, and I'm like tapping out. Like, should I like, am I letting my women friends down? Am I like, I'm C-suite material? What am I doing, right?
Yeah.
So there's a lot of that.
Yeah, I can totally relate, and to recognize that we have been conditioned to think it in a certain way about what success means for us, right? And I had a lot of the same feelings as I contemplated leaving my C-suite role. It was like, am I really going to give up? But I think what it was a redefinition of what was important to me, a redefinition of what success meant.
Yeah.
And also, back to what you said, there's a certain exhaustion that comes to trying to fit into a place where you just don't feel like you belong, or that you can actually make the impact and the difference that you want to make.
Yeah.
I guess for me, it's like soul alignment or not, right? It was like, so, and the fear, I love what you said about, when we step back, I believe that fear is totally something that is in our head. Like I believe that our reality is made up by our thoughts, and that thoughts can be trespassers. Thoughts can come in, and not to say that fear isn't real, it absolutely is. But did you use certain how did you talk yourself off how did you talk yourself into making the leap? Were there techniques or strategies, or what did you use to sort of support system? What were the main things?
I think everything, like I said, I was talking to this friend of mine. I think the other thing is that, I did some meditation.
Yeah.
I read a lot about sort of this idea of being present in the moment, right? And sort of like that anytime that you're not sort of looking at the present, you're just like, because you're looking at what's coming ahead or what's behind, you've essentially just wasted that moment, right? It's just wasted energy. So a lot of that, I think I did a lot of reflection on sort of like the meaning of fear, and I just, for me, came to this realization that fear is a feeling that allows me to then kind of use it to list out what are the actual things that I need to address in order to make a decision, right?
Yes.
And so it is a feeling, it is not a reason,
Exactly.
right? And so how do you transform fear into a device that helps you make decisions is what I spent a lot of time doing.
Beautiful.
I think I was talking with our friend here earlier too about what is enough, right?
Yeah.
And this idea of like, do you have too much of things that you don't want in your life and not enough of the things that you want, right? And at what point do you understand that you have enough of the stuff that you don't want and you're ready to incorporate into it more of what you want? And I remember too thinking just about my relationship with my daughter and all these moments that we would have, because I would do this thing where I would like leave work at 4:00 and I would rush home so I could be there at 5 so that I could meet her at the bus stop. And invariably, I would be wearing my headphones and I would be on a conference call waiting for her. And she would get off the bus and she would say, I can't believe you're on another call.
Right.
All of this effort to do all of that, to not be present in the moment, to be with her. And she was like calling me out on
it. Exactly.
every time, right? And it took about 4 months of me picking her up from school, right?
Yes.
For her to stop saying that. Because she still thought every time that she was going to get off, and then I was going to be like, okay, great, now I'm going to get on the next conference call, right? And so it was like really great because I decided, okay, I've had enough of that in my life.
Yes.
Like that is not one question I want her to ask me again.
Yes.
Enough of that. And more of what I want is like recognition that in this moment I'm being your mother. Right. In whatever moment that is, right? So just like trying to balance that out. And I'm a very, sort of planful person, and I can show you my spreadsheet of the things. I did. I think it's important to have intention about it, right? Like I did a spreadsheet, and I was
love that.
on the plus column, right? And my couch is on there.
Right.
Like it literally is, because I thought it was important. And, that sort of question, like I
Yes.
want to diminish the number of times my kid asks me that question. There were other things that I put on there, like I wanted to be able to be sort of like more present in moments. And I defined some of those moments, like, like dinner time.
Yeah. Yeah.
For example, I wanted to have more time to meditate, not just exercise, which was another thing that was important to me. So I just kind of like went through those things. And also money is on my spreadsheet. Money is important
Yes.
to me, and I
Yes.
needed to have a recognition that
Totally.
it is
Yes.
and that I want it. And I want to make it, right? So, so that had to be on my spreadsheet on the plus side.
Mm-hmm.
And then there are plenty of things on the minus side, right? I wanted to not be on a traveling, 2 to 3 days a week. I did not want that anymore. And I did not want to work in a company that was so big that I would feel lost into the politics and the void of it.
Right.
So anyway, so I, sort of like did my spreadsheet. And based on those priorities, I went out and talked to recruiters and looked for the kind of role that basically facilitates all of that in my life.
Right.
And I didn't get everything that I wanted,
Mm-hmm.
but I got more of what I wanted and less of it.
Because you were clear about it, and I love the intentionality of everything that you just said, because intention creates reality.
Mm-hmm.
And when we get clearer about things that we are intending, then there's a much better chance that we're going to get it. And also to know what were the things that you were willing to be flexible on or to negotiate and say, I this is a must have and this is not so much. In terms of becoming more, and I really relate to what you said about your daughter, and I'm really grateful that you're speaking about it, because I think a lot of women don't necessarily, and it doesn't just relate to daughters, it also relates to our relationships with our spouses or our families, that we live in a society that kind of sets us up not to be present and not to be in intimate relationship. And to avoid. And we're avoiding in some ways we're avoiding ourselves, we're avoiding our own self-growth. And I believe that when we're in the present moment, that's when our creativity comes online, which is feminine, such a feminine, we create from nothing, whether it's children or dresses or movies. And so did you notice any shift in sort of your creativity, or in terms of like did the presents bring other gifts that you weren't expecting?
Yeah, I mean, I had kind of always struggled with writing when I was working sort of in my intense job. And lately that isn't the case anymore, so I feel like that's a great gift that I'm super happy about. I think also, my sleep got better in this way that I didn't expect. So I'm not a person who has trouble sleeping, right? I recall having been in many hurricanes where everybody in my house was up and I was just peacefully asleep. But the restfulness of my sleep is markedly different, right? Which is an amazing gift because for your own mental sanity, sleep is the most restorative thing that you can enjoy. So I think that's very different. And I also think that I have so much clarity about things. So what's been interesting in this job is I'm sort of navigating through this change. And I had the experience of going through this acquisition, and so I could bring that to this role.
Yes.
And there's sort of all this change happening outside. And what's interesting now that is different than last year is that I have so much more clarity that I don't think comes just from the fact that I'm smarter. It's just because there's not so much internal stress here about what is happening, right? And so I'll get on the call with sort of the head of the foundation who I report into, and he's just and I'm like, well, let's just do this one thing, right?
Yeah.
And he thinks it's so helpful, right? And it's not like a brilliant thought. It's just that I don't have the stress of carrying it all. So it's so much easier for me to see things clearly.
Yes.
And I did not expect. It was not on my spreadsheet, but I'm just so much clearer about things, and I'm so much better at my job.
Yes.
It's incredible how much better I am at just like being able to parse out the BS from the stuff that I can change and do. And so, like, honestly, like, I spend a lot less time having to do the things. Yeah, I don't spin as much anymore. So much faster at work.
Yeah.
And it's just so much more rewarding because of it.
Yeah, I can definitely relate to that as well with my meditation practice and that connection. I love that you pointed to your heart center or to this part of your place, because we were working with the heart this morning. It's this idea that when we have clarity of purpose, and certainly meditation, breathing exercises, getting on your bike and doing the things that we feel that we love and that feel us back, bring us back, do actually end up being huge performance enhancers when we go to do our jobs. Because the clarity of sight, the line of sight is so much more direct, right?
Yes.
And that allows then probably the space for you to get creative with your writing and to use your imagination a little bit more. For me, that was a huge onslaught. I started to paint, I did pottery. I mean, things that I was a man in a suit basically for 20-something years. I mean, I went to Wall Street and I was very linear. If you knew me, you wouldn't, I've definitely transformed. And so I love that you had that bonus as well, because I think that's a key thing that I want to, have people know about.
So talk to us about your transformation, because you said just a little bit. Now I'm turning the chairs.
Okay.
and you said this year were like these two very important things happened that kind of like...
Okay. So I had, about 5 years ago, I had a 25-year career and a 19-year marriage all end in the same year. So a huge shift, but it happened that year, but what led up to that really is probably more important, which was this realization that I was not being fulfilled within what I was doing. This realization that even though I had what everybody wanted, that the success wasn't filling me, it wasn't fulfilling me. I noticed that I wasn't present with my children. I was flying, I was on the phone, I was on the BlackBerry before I went to the bathroom. I mean, I was, just in that cycle. And actually the company I worked for, Deutsche Bank at the time, sent me on a women's leadership program. It was a retreat in Paris, outside Paris. And one of the exercises they had us do, we had these coaches, was to draw a picture of ourselves. Our head, our heart, our future, and our past and our future. And in that exercise, I had this huge moment where I recognized that I didn't know who I was. Like, I felt like I was going to draw masks on. Like, I didn't know, like, the true person. Like, who... I was drawing a picture with a big smile, but I'm like, I knew that the smile was only for the outside. I wasn't smiling on the inside. And I also knew that if I continued my past, which was all of this work stuff, that I wouldn't have the future, which was much more time with my children, much more time doing fulfilling work that felt like it was giving back. And so that trip, I read a book on the way home called Working Identity by a woman called Yrthya A. She's an amazing Cuban woman who really, she works, I think she's in London School of Economics now, but she had done this programming for women leaders at INSEAD. I read the book on the way home and made a decision on the plane that I was going to go back to Columbia University to do executive coaching.
Oh, no.
And that set up a spark of event. But again, it was getting intentional. Mm-hmm. It was recognizing what was working, what wasn't working. It was also following what I felt was my thread, which was empowerment and to be in a place where I could give back to the women that, because I had started a little bit more mature than other women, but I had in 25 years, I had gone from being a contractor, came from Ireland with really nothing, to being the COO. And so I knew that in my journey, there was so much in there that I could help other women move along, whether it's to further their career or what it is to have them love themselves and have them have a sense of purpose and identity. Because I think that's the other thing. We don't necessarily connect to our individuality, and we become sort of robots in some way in what's expected for us. So the journey for me, the transformation, I mean, I would never have expected the places it's taken me over the last 5 years, and we'll have another conversation about that. But the one thing I'll say about it was the most important part of it was the time I gave myself to listen to what I wanted and not what other people expected of me. Because I, as a woman, and many women, had become a people pleaser and had become conditioned to behave and act in a certain way that I realized wasn't true to who I am.
Hi everyone, please make sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel and don't forget to hit the bell to receive notifications of all of our upcoming content. Thanks everyone, see you soon, have a great day.